Thank you. We'll go ahead and get started. Can everybody hear me okay? Is this working? All right. Great. All right. Well, we're here for another study session on the Healthy Living Campus. And before we get started, I'd like to invite Jackie up briefly to just make an announcement, because we're going to be talking about some things that will pertain to her announcement, and I wanted her to do that.
Well, great. Jackie Burling, Chief Wellness Officer, and it's with great pleasure I get to inform the board that we learned yesterday that we are officially a certified medical fitness facility, and the only one in the state of California. So thank you to Tom for supporting me, and thank you to the CHF team and Dr. Kim for making this happen.
Great job.
Great. We wanted to do that first because as I refer to the Center for Health and Fitness tonight, I'll be talking about our medically certified Center for Health and Fitness. So we're going to jump right in. We're going to just do a quick review of what we talked about last time. You'll remember that we came to you and discussed the master plan, and we were really talking about the what and the why related to the project. And we're going to do just a quick review, a couple slides of that tonight, and then we're going to jump into how. How do we finance it? How do we stage the campus in what's a longer-term master plan project and a bigger project? I think that'll be part of the discussion tonight, is how do we phase it and how do we finance it? Then our plan would be to continue meeting with the Finance Committee, continue meeting with our community working group, and then we would do an open house in the end of March. We're looking at doing that on Saturday, March 23rd. It would be here on campus, and it would be an open house where people could come and see and feel what the master plan looks like. And then we would be back before you in March discussing next steps, and we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. So real quick, we went over this last time, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but wanted to frame the issue of what and why are we doing this, and why are we considering the master plan at this time. So why the project matters, and Monica will get into this a little bit as far as funding and our funding structure. We'll go over that briefly tonight. But why the project matters is because we use revenues from this campus and other endeavors that we have to fund our programs. Obviously, we're funded with property taxes and other sources, but in order to fund all the programs that we do and all of the contributions we make, whether it's related to childhood obesity or the Blue Zones project, we need to use our assets to fund our services. And so that is a big reason why the project matters, why we need to consider it. Another reason is that we need to address the seismic issues of this building. We've had the engineers in here. They've described what's happening with this building, and we need to address the seismic issues. It's not something we're required to do, but the board has discussed that this is a priority and something that we need to do. So that's another reason why this project matters. We also want to create a place where we can house our Center of Excellence programs. So there we are with the Surgeon General and Blue Zones. There we are with our partners with the school district. We're getting ready to embark on our Healthy Mind initiative, where we're going to be looking at lifestyle and whether or not that has an impact on dementia. And that's something that we're very excited about. We want to get that study started. This is also our partnership with the cities. We need to create a place that reflects who we are and houses our Center of Excellence programs. So our goal, as we talked about last month, is to modernize the campus to meet the community needs. And so this is a shot of the Community Wellness Pavilion. We now have the medically certified exercise center would be expanded as part of this master plan, and then we would have residential care for the elderly in addition to the dementia care that we already have here, and then we would have active green space, and we'll talk exactly about how much green space we're discussing. So why does, okay, that's why the project matters. Why does our mission matter? What does that look like, and how has that evolved over the years? And it's something that has definitely evolved since we began. We just wanted to talk briefly about how that started. I think, as everybody knows, following World War II in 1945, there was the local district hospital act that allowed communities to build hospitals. That's something that the three beach cities came together to do. In 1994, the state recognized that public health strategies, prevention and primary care were vital to community health, and that health meant more than just hospitals. It also meant preventative health and community health. And so they amended the legislation in 1994, changed the name from hospital districts to healthcare districts. Shortly after that time, in the late 90s, was when Beach Cities Health District made the conversion to focus solely on community health. And we've been doing that for the last 20 years. In 2017, the Little Hoover Commission, which many of you may be aware of, took a look at health districts, and they held us up with a full-page review of, is Beach Cities Health District the future of healthcare districts, and discussed us as a possible model to address the evolution of what happens when community health needs change. And so they held us up as an example of one way to address that. Again, we went over this last time, but again, why does the BCHD mission matter? This is a quote here from Dr. Stephen Keller. What makes our school district special is we have BCHD. No other community has an organization so focused on students' health and integrated into the very fabric of programs and academics. And so what does that mean as far as results? How does that translate into outcomes? Well, we've seen the childhood obesity rate since 2007 drop from 20% to 6.4%. And that's something that we've done as a district, as a community, with Redondo and all of the residents. It really does take a village to have these types of results at a time when the national rate is at 18.5%. So these are just some of the results that we've had as a result of our partnership with the schools. We also, of course, had the Surgeon General visit, and he said, we tend to believe that America's health problems are too big and intractable. You have proven that communities can take charge and reverse the trend. And so he came and saw some of the results that we were having from Blue Zone, some of the results that we were having with our older adult community. We have over 800 community classes and programs, over 2,200 volunteer visits, and over 1,000 care management visits with our older adults.
This is just older adult program.
This is just older adults here. Some of the outcomes that the Surgeon General was looking at related to blue zones as measured by Gallup was that exercise was up, smoking down, above normal weight adults was down. Don't want to click too fast like last time where I shoot through the presentation. And so what Gallup computed was if you didn't have those results, what would our community have spent on medical bills if they hadn't seen smoking go down or hadn't seen above normal weight go down? And Gallup estimated that from 2010 to 2018, that'd be $21 million. So we're seeing results from our efforts, we're seeing results from our partnerships, and we're seeing results from 20 years of work in preventative health and community health. So let's jump into the campus. We went through this last time. This is the campus today. I think, as everybody knows, you have Prospect along the bottom of the screen there. We do own that brown square at the top. I'm not going to try. Well, maybe I'll try it. Sure. That we own that as well. So this was the plan that we rolled out a year ago. It was over a year ago. We talked with the community. What we heard was this is when we were trying to do everything. We were trying to add residential care for the elderly, assisted living. We also had independent living as part of this plan. And what we were hearing was concerns about density, traffics. We were hearing traditional concerns about impacts, but we were also hearing things about, well, you're not integrated with the community. We don't see gathering spaces. Who's going to be the beneficiary of this open space? And those are things that you as a board decided, okay, let's take a broader look, let's take a step back and take some time, engage the community, and look at a broader plan. We might have to manual, oops. Oh. Sorry, I did it. So this is the master plan that we have put together. You all reviewed this a month ago, and you can see that it opens up the site. You can see the open space that is a part of that plan. We wanted to show another view here from Barrel and Flagler. You can see that we're putting the Child Development Center here, trying to respond to what we were hearing about intergenerational concerns and making sure that the campus was intergenerational. You can also access the campus through here. This would be open, so this would not be enclosed or blocked off from the neighborhood, but would actually hopefully be inviting people into the campus. So real quick, I think I just scrolled through it, how it all phases in. So we'll just kind of jump to the point here since we've seen this before. But you have the Community Wellness Pavilion in the middle. You have 420 residential care units would be in the blue. We would have the new center for our certified health and fitness center here. You have the medical office building would remain. You would have acres of open space here. It's roughly 5.5 acres. We've calculated the amount of green space, and it represents more than 50% of the project, which is very high, and represents what we've heard from the community as a goal. We would have the bike and pedestrian path and connect to Diamond here, and we would have the Child Development Center here on the corner. So we wanted to compare the master plan to the current campus. Last time we talked a little bit about, you want to just scroll through it? Last time we talked a little bit about how does the master plan compare to the old plan we had a year ago. We found that to be, maybe that time had come where it was time to compare it to the current campus. And so when you compare it to the campus, you have 4 stories now. With the 514 building, you would have 4 stories under this plan. As far as above grade square footage, it would be more square footage with the new plan. But then we're projecting, and we've done some traffic circulation and some trip count studies. We haven't done a full-blown traffic analysis. That's something that would occur as part of the environmental impact review process. But our preliminary studies are projecting that there would be fewer vehicle trips due to the change in use that would be occurring here, where we have assisted living as opposed to the medical office building use. We would have 420 residential care units compared to the 60 memory care units. We would have the wellness pavilion. We would have modernized and expanded center for health and fitness. We have the green space, the active open space of 5.8 acres, and we would have an innovative preventative health campus, which today we have a 60-year-old former hospital site. So I'd like Carrie Ann to just describe this slide again and just walk us through this briefly.
So when we think about your traditional model of senior housing or assisted living, you'll find that they tend to be internal or insular facilities that are just for seniors, and any kind of activity or green space takes place inside within the walls of the facility. Normally their green space are enclosed courtyards. So there's less opportunity for that kind of a facility to be integrated and connected to the community. And while many good things happen in a facility like that, it is because they're coming in, they're brought in, they're purposeful, time limited, as opposed to actually truly embedded in a community. We have the opportunity here on our campus to build a vibrant multi-use campus for all ages to experience health and wellness. And when you think about housing older adults in assisted living on this campus, we have the opportunity to integrate them with programming, to include them in the activities that are happening, or at least for those who might be more frail, to give them something tremendously entertaining to watch. If you think about Zumba on this campus. One of the things that concerns me when we're here with memory care is you see families come to visit, and where do they have to visit? Where can the grandchildren play? Where do they take their loved one on a walk? If they're pushing a wheelchair on this campus right now, they're, to use an old video game reference, they're playing Frogger in our parking lot. And it's not safe, it's not inviting, it doesn't create a place for connection and true visits. And so I think we have an opportunity to help folks age in place, whether they're well enough to come out of the facility and participate in the Center for Health and Fitness and the activities going on here, or if they're so frail that they're simply watching through the windows. We have an opportunity to include everybody in the activity here.
Okay, so that's just a quick sort of review of what and why, and now we're going to get into the how and talk about some financial strategies, and Monica's going to kick that part off.
Okay, good evening. You can hear me okay? Okay, so before we actually delve into the how alternatives, I wanted to give you all a little bit of a perspective of where how falls in the long-term financial planning process. And it's really part of a cycle. We, as a district, has fiscal policies that kind of grounds us, and the main policy there that we abide by is the preservation of principle. And in other words, that's really to ensure that the district remains adequate reserved to provide funding for the future. And how we do that is we have been reinvesting in long-term assets. And keeping that in mind, we developed our preliminary analysis of kind of, I call it as is or do nothing outlook, where we projected our current revenue sources and our expenses. And we realized that this building, has reached its useful life. It's going to start costing us more than what it's making us. So we mobilized. That's part of mobilization. We moved into this environmental scan process where we've been meeting with you, the community, and we started with a site plan, like Tom mentioned, and we evolved. We went through many analyses simultaneously with market studies. We studied the building, and the seismic issue came up, and we really evolved from that site plan to a master plan, and it's a long-term plan. And so with that, we have then prepared many cost analysis and fiscal analysis where we projected, future needs of the district as is and what it can become with fundings. And so we're really in this evolution or evaluation, I should call it, evaluation process where we're looking at the fiscal strategic alternatives that we have for the future. And with that, we'll be analyzing ownership levels, debt requirements, and capital construction gaps that will exist with this project. And as we move forward, it's good to look at how we're currently funded. And currently, we get basically funding from 5 main sources: Adventureplex and Center for Health and Fitness, and they basically pay for their own operation, and it's subsidized some for overhead and capital investments. A quarter of our funding comes from property taxes, and we will talk more about the 18% because that is a model that has worked for the district, and that's our Sunrise joint venture. And the investment is currently the cash we have on hand that we can contribute to the project. And then 32% is from lease revenue or tenant revenues. And 23% of that, or $3.2 million, actually comes directly from this building. And that's what we're looking to renew. So before we delve even further to understand our future funding, I'd like to take a quick look at how the district have been funded through its existence since 1955. And its purpose has to be in existence for the meeting the community needs. And so in 1955, the residents of the district came together and voted for the district to be created. And at that time, property taxes were enacted to support the district through its existence, and it is still supporting us. In addition, at that time, the residents also voted for general obligation bonds to support the construction of the hospital. And then the hospital started operating and provided the revenues going forward. So as we come to the latter part of that period, the increased local hospital competition really wasn't worth for Tenet, who also actually is a really long-term player, and they still exist. They had to change. But at the time, they decided they could not afford, with all the competition out there, to continue operating the hospital. So they, had to buy out their lease, which had about 15 years left, I believe, and that provided funds for the district to invest in further long-term assets that could provide funding for the district into the future, such as the joint ventures and the health and fitness operations and this building. Obviously, we had to remodel to accommodate for MOB at the time, so some of the funds were used for that as well.
MOB, medical.
Oh, medical office building, yes. And so, that has been now over 20 years, about 20 years, and the building is 60 years old, and so it really has reached its useful life, and we have seen that. I mean, this building is tremendously costly. We have tried to lease out the third floor, and we have showed it many, many times, but it's not up to par to what is out there in the community, and it's very expensive to rebuild medical office building because of the high impacts of it, the traffic, the parking, and all these things that comes together with it. So we're looking to replace that revenue source or the funding for that, and the RCFE model is what we're looking at currently with lesser impacts. And as you can see, I also wanted to show that the district really operates like any other organization, more as a nonprofit, because we provide our funds out to the community unless we are able to invest it in future long-term funding sources. And so the district has really gone through a cycle of ups and downs where it has kind of reinvented itself. And just as a quick background, as we move forward in talking about ourselves, this is what I was talking about, that, the expenses for this building is starting to cost us more, and there's a big notes receivable with our current tenant that we will expire as well, and we foresee some tenants leaving us, and so we will lose some of that revenue. And what that causes to our cash current balance, that is providing us around $1 million in investment income right now, but the reserve is gonna be used up in the next few years. We have this window of opportunity, and if we don't do anything, it will start eating up the reserves that the district has.
Can you go back now 2 slides? So this is the cash, that's...
So this assumes that the building will remain as is. We do nothing. That means that
expenses and total revenues.
Yes, including capital.
Okay.
So the capital requirements for the building is going to increase, and it's already very big.
So this is operating budget, and the next one is reserves.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Just clarify.
Yes. Thank you.
So as we start to talk about financial strategies, we just wanted to ground back just for a moment back to our mission. The word partnerships is embedded in our mission. That's something that we're going to be talking about tonight. The key for moving forward with this redevelopment and looking at the Healthy Living Campus into the future is going to be partnerships. Obviously, programs and services for the people is obviously extremely important too, but partnerships is going to be a key facet as we look at financial strategies. We then wanted to just be clear on the vision for the campus, and we talked about this a little bit last time, but the Healthy Living Campus project is a unique opportunity for our community to chart the future of health by purposefully building an intergenerational, vibrant, research-driven campus where people can learn and engage in healthy behaviors, form meaningful connections, and be well for many generations to come. And so we've talked about this last time, where we started out as a hospital. For the last 20 years, I would call us a medical office park with a little bit of community, where we have the Center for Health and Fitness. We have our programs for older adults. What we're looking at doing with this vision is shifting it to community with a little bit of medical, and that's what the master plan contemplates, and that ties back to this vision of trying to create a place where people come to be well. So when we look at your pillars, we've done a lot of work with you on this, and the community and strategic plannings and committees have all worked on this. The one that we're going to focus on tonight is the one in the bottom left-hand corner there, which is to leverage the campus to expand community health programs and services. So you all have listed that as a key principle or policy pillar, and that's a key point. So not only are we replacing an aging asset, or one that's already aged, that has seismic issues, we're also looking to leverage this asset to be able to expand our programs and services. So how do we do that? What do we have sort of going for us? Well, we have highly valued land, assets, and organization. We have 11 acres in the South Bay. That's something that a lot of other health districts in California do not have. Thanks to the management and leadership of the district in the past, we have $15 million in cash that we can contribute to the project. We have the ability to issue tax-exempt debt as a public agency. And there's a significant market need for residential care for the elderly, as well as it syncs up with our vision and our community need, as was described by Carrie Ann. And then we have proven public-private partnership experience with assisted living, where and we're going to show you just a brief history of that, because I think that'll be fairly telling for where we're going, obviously on a much larger scale, but where we're going in the future. To today, $2.3 million comes to our programs, our services, our children from that partnership. So what it started out as a land lease, and those of you that were on the board or involved with the district will remember that. And it started off as a land lease where the district was receiving $17,000 a month for Sunrise facility up in Hermosa on PCH. And then in 2002, the district became an 80% owner. It contributed $4.4 million in capital to do that, and it borrowed $9.8 million to basically become an 80% owner of that enterprise. And 10 years later, the $7.8 million in debt was paid up, and it represented a total investment in that property of $14.2 million. And so what we saw at the beginning, when we were more, when things were starting out and we were issuing debt, contributing equity, is that we had relatively lower ROI. And over the years, as we invested in it, you can see how that ROI has increased with the Sunrise facility on PCH, to where, recently it's been, in the 12 to as high as 16% range, and again, generates about $2.3 million a year. So that was the good news. One thing that we want to just be very clear about in the early stages of this, you obviously have the debt that you have to issue in order to close that capital contribution gap, and we'll talk about that gap as it relates to this project. And so you had the debt in the beginning, and so we basically showed a percentage here of debt to equity. We kept it on the same scale as the ROI, but you can see how the debt to equity was very high in the beginning when the district was investing in that property, and then it decreased over roughly a 10-year period, dropped off completely when it was paid off, and then you can see the ROI on the bottom, where it's basically the same graph, different scale from the prior slide. And so we just want to be clear about that, and we'll talk more about that tonight, but if I was going to give you a sort of the Cliff Notes version, it would be there, as we're talking about financing and staging, there are two things you got to keep in mind. The capital contribution, how do you do that? How do you close that gap in the beginning? And then what is your long-term return on investment? What does your revenue look like in the future? Because that's what you're going to use to leverage your asset to provide expanded programs, which you've stated as your policy goal. Was there a question? Yes, please.
Well, I wanted to comment that I was on the board at the time. And you look at the numbers now and you say it's a no-brainer. Of course you were going to do a program like that. It's made so much sense with hindsight. But we didn't have that at the time. We had what we have now, which is projections and ideas and making a capital investment that was really large out of our reserves, and what did that mean for the future. And just that we made that decision, and it turned out to be a really good decision
Right.
based on the information that we had, so.
Right. So hopefully that will be
Yeah.
deja vu all over again
Yeah.
here with this project, but only on a larger scale. So with that, we want to delve into some of the numbers, and we're going to be completely transparent. All of this information is on our website, and we also want to be clear that tonight this is a study session. We'll talk about next steps, but there's no action that you all are taking tonight. But, our plan is to discuss the numbers, provide an opportunity for public input, and then get your thoughts on where we go from here. So what we did is we looked at different strategies, different concepts. You know, one concept that was brought up was, well, why don't you sell your land and assets? Well, if you can do that and acquire another asset that would generate revenue, that would work to fund your programs in the future. Obviously, one thing that we never want to do is use one-time revenues to fund ongoing expenses. And so if you did that, you would not be able to fund your expenses into the future. But what you could do perhaps is sell an asset if there was an opportunity to acquire another asset that was consistent with our mission and our vision that would allow us to generate more revenue. That might be something to think about, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. One thing that we saw, and we'll show you why we came to this conclusion, or how we came to this conclusion, is that based on the size here and what we're talking about as far as scale and scope of the project, it would be infeasible for us to do this on our own. We're going to need a partner. We also looked at the 514 building renovations, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And then we also looked at the original site plan of trying to do everything, medical office building as well as residential care for the elderly. So when you look at the site plan that we had a year ago, the cost was $460 million, and it did not align with your pillars, with your policy objectives. We also heard from the community concerns about it that we discussed earlier. We then looked at, all right, what if we try to align it differently, address the issues that we're hearing from the community, but still try to do everything. Try to do medical office building in addition to residential care. That came in at $585 million. Then we looked at just the building renovations, and that came in at $127 million. That does not include cost of moving the tenants or lost revenue. And what would we build it for? You know, Monica talked a little bit about medical office building. We've been unable to lease out the third floor. We have a tenant most likely leaving from the fourth floor. So it gets to that same issue of, yes, you could remodel it, but what's the revenue that's going to support that construction, but also provide revenue into the future for our programs? So we looked at, I'm not going to change slides, I'm just going to use the fancy pointer here, hopefully. So we looked at the phasing. This is a little different from what we showed you last time, but this would be where we would look to build the Center for Health and Fitness in phase 1. You have residential care for the elderly here. Then you would have the Child Development Center here on the corner. And then based, frankly, on input that we've heard in the last month, we looked at the idea of, well, if we could afford it and figure out a way to fund the capital contribution, which we'll talk about in a moment, could we do the community wellness program in phase 2, do it sooner? And yes, you can do it from a construction standpoint, because as soon as you start to build these units here, you have to remove the power plant, which powers the building. And so at that point, the building can come down. You would have already moved your tenants in the dementia care. You would have moved the Center for Health and Fitness. You would have moved child development. And so you could look to build the Community Wellness Pavilion in phase 2 rather than waiting for 11 years into phase 3. So that's something that we wanted to share with you. It's a slightly different. So when we talk about costs and phases, we're talking about this drawing here. Sorry, man. All right, go for it. So in phase 1, and so we're going to go through each phase and then we'll show you the total cost. So in phase 1, we would be looking at 162 residential care for the elderly units. That would be about $110 million. There would be parking Then there would be the Center for Health and Fitness, which we're estimating at about $15 million. Remember, that's an expanded facility. It includes a warm water therapy pool as part of that. And then the child development piece would be about $10 million. And so that would be a total cost of $153 million. A couple of things to keep in mind as we're looking at each phase here. This does not have the bike path in it. That would be $1.8 million. We're trying to find a way to fund that perhaps through some grant funding. And it includes in this phase, so this would be phase 1, which would, occur in the next, up to 6 years. It would be about 3 to 6 years. And just with that time period, we've put in a construction escalation cost of $14 million. So a lot of times when people look at numbers, they don't include everything. They don't include soft costs, and they certainly don't often include escalation costs to this degree. So this is just in the first phase that we're looking at $14 million in escalation costs. And I think
it
another
includes soft costs in terms of the Center for Health and Fitness and the child development.
It does.
Okay.
Yep. And then the right-hand column is an important one to keep in mind as you're thinking about, because I'm about to tell you there's a gap in construction funding. I think people understand that as far as that initial capital investment. So when we're thinking about how do we close that gap, we wanted to show the programs as a percentage of what's generating revenue. So for instance, in this first phase, 72% of the project cost is generating revenue around the residential care for the elderly. So if we're going to look at reducing costs, we would recommend that you would want to identify non-revenue producing. You don't want to cut costs of programs that are going to generate revenue. Phase 2, we would come in with less units, about 99 units. We would have the parking, and then there's the wellness pavilion at $73 million. And you can see how that percentage shifted. So now, instead of almost 3/4 in the first phase being revenue generating, we have less than half is revenue generating. So we're coming in with something that doesn't generate revenue for construction and capital. And so in this phase, we have escalation costs of $19 million. All of these projections are conservative. It doesn't include the land value, it does not include revenue that we would receive for the child care lease of the new facility, but it does include the escalation costs. Then in the third phase, we would come in with the remaining residential care for the elderly units of 159. That would be almost $200 million, or 85% revenue-based cost. And so when you add it all up, it comes to a project total of $537 million. You have the RCFE at $375 million, or 70% of the project cost. When you add in parking and child care center, you're up closer to 80%, but then you have the Center for Health and Fitness, the Wellness Pavilion, and the Flagler Diamond Bike Path. We don't anticipate generating enough revenue to cover the capital or construction costs of those amenities or benefits. And so the big number, of course, also, when you add it all up, is $90 million in project escalation costs. So almost a fifth of the project is escalation costs because you're building it over 15 years. And so the analogy I gave the other night at the community working group, and this is going to be up to you as the policymakers, it's the trade-off, right, of, okay, do you build it up front? That's going to cost you less if you build it up front, but you're going to have to cover that capital gap, and you're going to have impacts. And so that's a policy question to you. I'm kind of a guy, when I go to the beach, I go in quick. My wife kind of puts her big toe in and goes slowly. It's really kind of a preference. It really is a trade-off. It's something that we're going to need to talk about as far as a community, because you can see some of the benefits of going sooner. You don't have the escalation costs, but you do have more construction impacts. If you stretch it out over time, you have the ability to assess the market. You have the ability to see what the demand is, but it costs you more. And so that's going to be some of the trade-offs that we'll be talking about.
Is this all underground parking?
So it would be underground parking in phase 1 with the green. We can go back to that if you'd like. And then the parking structure would be in phase 3.
Yeah,
correct?
underground in phase 1 and 2.
That's correct, phase
Above
2.
ground in phase 3.
Oh, okay.
The green and the orange would be underground.
Okay.
And so we're now charging for parking.
What's that?
If parking's bringing in revenue, we'll be charging for parking.
No, we weren't recommending that. What
Okay.
we're trying to capture there is we're going to need
You
to,
have to do the parking with the, it's part of.
with
the-
our partner as it relates to the residential care for the elderly, they're going to need to share in some of that parking cost. We didn't
Right.
break it
Oh,
out
that
here.
way, okay.
We're not anticipating charging for parking. That would be a policy question for you all if you wanted to do that. But we have not built in parking revenue into
Okay.
this. So let's talk about the gap. I was mentioning it as far as it relates to capital contribution and that construction upfront cost. So if we were to do it on our own and we would issue debt, we would do similar tactics to what we did with Sunrise. We would contribute equity, and we would still have a gap of $311 million. And so that's why we come to the conclusion we can't do this on our own. We just did a scenario here of 50-50. We don't know if this would be the partnership, and we'll show you how this breaks out when you get into the phases. But basically, you would have to, if we were 50-50 owners, we would need to contribute $30 million in equity, and then we would still have a gap of around $161 million for the entire project. If we were just to do a land lease like we started out with Sunrise, we wouldn't have to contribute the capital. We would have a partner do that, and we would get revenue for that. But we would lose control and vision of the project. And as you'll see in a moment when we show you the long-term projections of the revenue, so this would solve our gap problems, right? But then the issue will be revenue generation for the long term, because it's just a land lease. And I think we've seen that with 510 and 514. And so let's show you what that looks like. We want to first kind of dive a little deeper into the phases. So you can see phase 1, if you were to do it all on your own, you'd still have a gap of $56 million. You could contribute equity of $15 million. We were showing that as that's something that we have today. You could contribute equity of $15 million and still be at your reserve levels that you've identified at a policy level that Monica was describing. So you have $15 million that we can contribute. When you look at the 50-50 partner, for phase 1, you contribute the $15 million. You still have a gap of $20 million. Remember, the land value's not in there. Revenue from child development's not in there. We do have net income that you could go borrow for and close that gap. So phase 1 under this scenario is within reach with the district's resources. So how do you fund the gap? That's the big question, right? That's you got to solve that one first, because we're going to show you the long-term revenue, just like we saw for Sunrise, will likely be there. But how do you get over that initial hump of funding the capital contribution? So obviously, we've talked about some of the sources with cash, land, buildings, BCHD value. When we're talking with our partners, we're obviously going to be bringing up our certified medical facility. Michelle, you didn't hear, but it was announced today that we are certified with the Center for Health and Fitness by the Medical Fitness Association. So we're going to be saying, hey, this isn't your little workout room that you have in your other facilities. This is a medically certified fitness facility that would be on site for your residents. So that's the type of thing that we're talking about when we're saying that we're going to be leveraging our value. Debt financing, obviously municipal bonds. I won't bore you with the different types of bonds, but we're well versed in that. There could be revenue bonds related to the revenue that we get from the residential care for the elderly. There could be then what are called lease revenue bonds, which would be debt that we would issue and pay back through net income that we have. They're private lenders. So these are all different strategies and ways in which we could handle the debt. P3 is a public-private partnership. We talked about the 50/50 and the operators. We think there might also need to be some health partnerships. Maybe we can partner with some other health partners or other partners if there are people that want to partner with us and share this vision. And then we are recommending, and we've been talking about this, is there's going to need to be most likely new revenue sources, whether it's grants, philanthropy, sponsorships, or other public funding. Maybe there's contributions from the state, maybe there's contributions from the federal government. We haven't started to do any of that, but we're saying we're likely going to need that. So the other thing that happens, right, when you're closing the gap, say we just can't come up with the capital, then what happens? Well, you could look, if you could keep the project cost down, and that may come into the discussion about, do you want to go sooner to get rid of that escalation cost? But then you could start to slide your ownership interest if you wanted to do that, right? This is all assuming a 50/50. Again, it's going the word trade-off is going to keep coming back. So one way to close the gap might be to look at your ownership percentage. We're recommending try to close the gap while optimizing our ownership percentage. We want to be as close or over to 50/50 as possible, but wanted you to understand that may need to slide depending upon our success of generating capital. Obviously, we need to assess the land and our value. That's something that we're in the process of doing. You all approved a contract at your last meeting, and so we're doing that. Explore new funding sources. We're already doing that. You all approved an application for a grant at your last meeting related to the bike path. You could look at reducing the project scope. We, again, would recommend you look at the non-revenue components for that. And then this is sort of that trade-off that I talked about as far as if you could find another revenue-generating enterprise, you might want to think about selling another asset to look at that. For instance, the 510 building, which is literally right here, has a lease for another 11 years. You could, either we could or we could maybe with our partner look to buy out that lease. What that does is that allows you to reduce escalation costs of roughly $57 million, because now you're able to build that piece sooner, you're able to get revenue sooner, but then you got to figure out the capital contribution, and then you have the construction impacts if you do it sooner. So it shortens the project timeline, which has positives and negatives. It definitely reduces the cost, but it increases the need for capital today. So when you look at, okay, you say we either approach this in phases. Remember, it's a master plan, so typically the way people do these huge projects like this is they do them over time, and they take into account the escalation costs and all of that. And so, all right, let's say that we're able to fund those gaps or we're able to build it over time. What happens with the revenue? And so if you're able to build it within the 15-year time frame, what we're seeing there's our old friend, the green one that Monica was talking about, where if we do nothing, that's where we're going to start to eat into our fund balance. If we were to just do a land lease, things kind of stay flat or actually decrease. I kind of call it the slow burn a little bit. You're not meeting your goal of leveraging the campus to expand. You're not expanding under that scenario with a lease. We just don't think you're going to be able to get enough for the lease to expand services into the future. You're going to be able to stay status quo. I guess that's yellow or orange line. That should remind you of the Sunrise, that graph that we saw. What's that?
That was funny.
Oh.
I'm giving you a little chuckle.
Okay. Tried to be funny, but that's a good attitude to have as we're looking at strategies. But so there's the investment coming in, right? You're holding at the reserve levels. You have a spike up as revenues start to come in with the early phases, and then you reinvest in the next phase. And then we're projecting there by 2035, so roughly 20 years from now, that you would be back at the level that we are today. Again, those are projections, but this shows you that from a revenue generation standpoint, an ROI standpoint, based on the market studies we've done and the estimates we've done, that the revenues are there in the future. The trick is that capital contribution. So we just wanted to just talk briefly about and try to sort of articulate what we're talking about as far as benefits that would come from the new master plan concept. So you would have enhanced residential care options for our community. You would have the community wellness pavilion. You would have a signature, probably one of the first of its kind, buildings where people are coming to be well and really charting the path for our community about how to do that. You would have reduced traffic impacts would be a benefit. You would have 5.8 acres of usable green space. You would have an expanded medical exercise facility with a warm water therapy pool. You would have a new and improved child development center that would really encourage and cause, I think, more intergenerational programs and interaction with the older adults. You would have an enhanced bike and pedestrian path, and you would still have medical offices, pharmacy, physical therapy directly on site for the residents of the campus. So then, again, assuming all of the assumptions come together and this model's worked for the last 20 years, we're thinking it will work for the next 50, is then you're able to generate revenue from that campus, which then could look at programs such as childhood obesity prevention, partnership with youth, dementia research, Blue Zones Project, social workers, senior care management, volunteer services, and help fund these programs into the future. These are our existing programs. Then we're saying that there would also be money to fund expanded services around research and development, mental health and happiness, which we're seeing is our next big health priority based upon what the community is telling us. Medical fitness therapy, food literacy, older adult daycare, care management, substance use prevention. There could be other things on here. You know, we don't want to limit the universe of innovation partnerships. I don't know if there's going to be telemedicine, or maybe there's some artificial intelligence thing that we haven't even thought of, and maybe that's a program that we want to expand into. Maybe that's a revenue opportunity for us. But the idea then is that then all of those services come back to the 3 school districts, our 130,000 residents, our partners, and the cities and community organizations. So in summary, master plan is estimated, you know, over a 15-year period, including almost $100 million in escalation costs at $537 million. We don't believe that we can do it by ourselves. We think immediate action of some sort is critical, whether that's pursuing phase 1 or looking at other alternatives. We believe that because of the seismic condition of this building and the fact that this building is rapidly deteriorating. I think if there are any tenants here, they will attest to that with power outages and leaky pipes. That's something that happens almost weekly here now. We need to continue partnership development and find the right partner. We'll talk about input that we got from the community working group in just a moment, but that was a key point from them. We need to close the capital contribution to maximize ownership. So we need new revenue sources so that we can try to at least be 50-50, if not a majority owner. We need expert assistance. We need to continue to invest in figuring this out as we move forward, because this is not just a building we're replacing, but it's the future of the Beach Cities Health District. And that entitlements, you know, land use entitlements, what we'll be able to build here will be essential to finish the financial analysis and to determine whether or not we have partners. And that's a key point that we want to talk with you about tonight. And in order to really know the answer, we're going to need to know what we can build. And to know that, we would need to move forward with the EIR. And we'll talk with you about that in a moment. So initial recommendations, and this is what we talked to the Finance Committee about. You know, we need a bigger boat, right? We need more meetings. We need more. We need to keep working on this. It's going to be a work in progress. So we talked with the Finance Committee about additional Finance Committee meetings, and what we talked with them about was moving forward with the EIR concurrent with Partnership Development, Finance Committee, and Community Review. And so we'll talk about what that means from a timing standpoint. The Finance Committee supported that recommendation. What we heard from the working group, and I think everybody's familiar with that. I saw several members here tonight. One of the things that they talked about was the issue of affordability and affordable residential care versus funding preventative health services. And so they had a dialogue about how do we price this? Should it be affordable residential care for the elderly? That was one piece of the discussion. The other side was, well, we're spinning off revenue that goes to free programs from residential care for the elderly at market value, which one do we want to look at? So they quickly went to the trade-off there of affordability versus generating revenue to fund programs such as our older adult programs that are free to people. And so that was something that they talked about. There was a discussion about whether it was worth adding more units to fund affordable residential care. That was brought up by one of the working group members. That would be an option. I don't know what the community or market tolerance for that would be. I think that might be somewhat limited based on the market studies, but that's certainly an option that additional units could be built. And there was also discussion about should the number or cost of the affordable units be proportional to the local need. There was some discussion by the working group about that. And then there was also discussions about partnerships and kind of being cautious of partnerships that could erode our vision or subvert our vision. This is what we heard from the working group, who's been with us for almost 2 years. I think we told them it's going to be a 3-hour tour, and that didn't quite work out that way. But they're willing to stick with us and help us and continue to help us. And so what we recommend that you do tonight is take some public input. Then we'll come back with a couple of maybe questions to frame your discussion. You can obviously provide whatever input you'd like, and then we'll talk about next steps.
So I have 3 people who want to speak for public input. I assume there are more people who want to speak. Where are the forms if people want to fill them out? Are they at the table? They're at the table near the entry. If you want to fill them out, just helps us to know how many people are speaking. You don't have to fill them out. You can just go up when I've finished with the people who have filled them out. Craig Cadwallader, you want to speak? And how many minutes do they have? 3. You have 3 minutes.
I'll try not to take that long. I'm Craig Cadwallader, and I'm a Manhattan Beach resident. And having heard this presentation now 3 times, 3 nights in a row, I think I could give it soon. So, but I think we have a pretty good idea.
There will be a test.
I think we have a pretty good idea of what it's going to take to finance this project. And it seems obvious to me that some sort of partnership deal is going to be required. And just very briefly, the thing I'm most concerned about is losing the focus and the vision with bringing in partners. It's often the case partner might not be fully aligned and might shift the direction of Beach Cities Health District in a way that is not the best for what we're coming to expect from this organization. And as far as there were some healthy discussions on the market rates versus affordability, I think it does need to keep in mind what some of the affordability issues are in the market here, which with some of the things going on in the country, you just don't know where it's going to be in the future. So to try to keep a focus on the mission and the unique benefit that this organization makes me such a big fan of Beach Cities Health District, I think we need to focus on that and really kind of keep a balance in check without the market forces overwhelming. So thank you.
Thank you. Bob Pinsler.
The Beach Cities Health District has morphed into new versions of itself every time the big guys surpass them in the fields in which they're operating. At the time you started out, you filled a need that was missing in the area, be it a hospital or providing localized medical services. Now you are once again planning on another molding of your skin to become something else. This time, however, you are getting to the service area already occupied by the private sector. So if you're going to go through with this, why should you be replicating what the big boys are already doing? That is, providing rich people with assisted living opportunities while leaving those with more moderate incomes unable to find that service locally. You are a public agency proposing to use public land for exclusive uses. This fails the smell test. If, as you claim, you wish to offer the world a new model of senior living, how about filling your role as serving the public by making most, if not all, of the housing you are proposing to provide for those of moderate means? By doing this, you will be making a necessary statement about the venal senior housing community as it now exists. This will mean finding a partner for whom maximizing profit is not a goal. This should also be your goal. You are not a profit-making entity. You receive property tax money, and while you provide a host of worthwhile services throughout our cities, it should not be financed by a discriminatory scheme. While my desire for the use of this property is very different from your plan, if this is going to go forward, I believe it is in the best interest of the cities you serve that you do not duplicate the ongoing market, but do something very different. Populate this proposed campus with the seniors of the 3 cities that cannot afford the existing and growing number of communities being designed and priced solely for the rich. You have a unique opportunity to make this case. Nevertheless, I still think you should sell the property, particularly to whomever wishes to turn it into a park, and then use the resources you gain, along with the ongoing sales tax revenue and other income, to provide most of the services you do now until the district sunsets, likely in 20 to 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you. George Gilbert?
That's Jeff Gilbert.
Jeff
Yes.
Gilbert?
It's English. I mean,
It's not a G. Okay, it's, okay.
Hi, I'm Jeff Gilbert, resident of Redondo Beach, and I'm part of the working group, although because of taking care of my mother-in-law in Arizona, I have not been able to attend all the meetings. The more meetings I attend, the more it comes out that this is now a commercial institution rather than the way it was originally proposed, saying about the silver tsunami of my generation who need help. And it sounded more of a community project at that time for those people that are getting old. They may not be able to age in place, and this is a solution for that. Now, I don't mind that Beach Cities Health District wants to get into the commercial aspects of providing health care at the highest possible cost, meaning a competitive price with those other institutions that are there to make money. But I do really wish they'd come out in the first place and say, we want to provide what Beach Cities Health District wants to provide now. But we're not able to do that with the facilities as they exist now because we're paying more and more for it all the time, and we do not have enough income from our tax base to do it. Therefore, we are now going to get into the business of providing elder health care. Let's be transparent about that. The marketing research that I saw indicated that perhaps 75% of the units that they're planning, it doesn't indicate how many people. A lot of this information that we're getting doesn't have a lot of detail to it. For example, parking, traffic, we don't have any numbers, but certainly somebody's made some scientific investigation about that. But the number of people that they plan are 75% of the Beach Cities Health District cities, 25% of those, the people that they want to fill the units would be able to come from Palos Verdes or Torrance or other areas that would have people that could afford that. There was no mention in the marketing plan, as the last speaker said, about having people of actual financial need in this community, which the silver tsunami kind of relates to, who actually can afford elder health care. So while I applaud the efforts of trying to expand Beach City's health district as a community health district thing, I wish they were a little bit more transparent, as that now we have a way to make enough money on this side business that we have with our land and future buildings to be able to do that than what they're doing now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Wayne Craig? And that's the last one I have, so if you want to speak next, when he's done, please stand up.
Good evening. My name is Wayne Craig. I'm a resident of District 1. I probably also have a different perspective, or a more unique perspective of this facility than probably a lot of people here do. I was born here. I was born here 3 years, I believe, after the hospital was actually first opened. And I think that's the initial intent the public really wanted to carry forward. Now, I understand there's been some issues with the building, deterioration and such, but it seems as though, and I'll echo what Mr. Pinsler said, the public really have a perception here that now the Beach City's Health District is getting in the profit business of housing high expensive elder care. And I don't think that's a perception that is going to go over very well with the public. If it does get constructed the way it is, I've spoken to people in fire service who are very concerned about the impact it'll have on the city with response to emergency service response. One of the city council members actually made a comment to the fire department saying that, well, gee, it shouldn't be a big deal. They could just go to the urgent care over here. That's not the way it works. This person's running for re-election, believe it or not. Anyway, I do think that it makes some sense to do some reimagining of what you could do with the property here, but I don't believe that the public is going to be really happy with this. I represented a large group called Rescue Waterfront. As you know, we've been Rescue Waterfront. Okay. As you know, we battled a large developer in the harbor. Now, I'm not saying I'm not weighing in either way on this project, as it certainly sounds. I met with Mr. Backley before, and I certainly appreciate him taking the time and explaining some options they had. But I can tell you from folks I've spoken to, there's a lot of feedback that is not coming out good. Public outreach is going to be very important in this project. And at a recent meeting that the mayor had last week of the State of the City, I actually asked him a question of how he thought about the impact the Beach City's Health District's plan will have on the city. And the mayor actually made a comment, didn't answer it directly, but basically said that the city attorney and the city would have to be weighing in on that. So I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I would think that greater public outreach, greater public contact, to maybe just explain this better to everyone, so you avoid the problems that we've seen in other parts of the city with certain development. But I do think that high-priced elder care isn't something the public is really going to be for. Thank you.
Thank you. Dancy. Please state your name for the record.
Dency Nelson, Hermosa Beach, and I am a part of the community working group, and like Mr. Cadwallader, this is the third night in a row that I've heard this particular presentation, and I get a little extra enlightenment each time I hear it. Those of you who heard me speak before know that I am a big fan of this project, of the idea of the Healthy Living Campus. What did come out of the workshop on Monday night was exactly what Mr. Backley said, is that there's a, and Mr. Pinsler and also Craig, Wayne Craig. The community is assuming, because it's the Beach City's Health District, and I would too, that this would be, residential units would be affordable units, so that it would be accessible to folks who cannot afford the very high price of elderly care. And indeed, the community would have to recognize the value of any trade-off, that other important word that Mr. Backley mentioned, the trade-offs that might be available if indeed the cost of those residential units is higher than what might be a more affordable. What does that trade-off provide? It provides providing those additional services that has been traditional for the Beach City's Health District, and even more so with this vision of being a place to come as a community, get well, learn how to stay well at a more affordable cost for the larger community. So there's that trade-off. I don't think what I'm happy about is that Mr. Pinsler, who at the outset was just dead set against any residential units, is kind of warming to the thought that maybe they could be, shaking his head no, but he did add the caveat, it would if we're going to go in that direction, they need to be affordable, not at market rate. Again, that's the trade-off, and that's certainly what the community is going to have to discuss. Having said that, if indeed we do decide to go forward, I don't think that is a decision that has to be made right now, and that the EIR can move forward, and we can pursue those other ideas of partnerships that might lower those costs. Or, as Mr. Smeltzer in our workshop suggested, in that the state is faced with the dilemma of housing, perhaps there may be some legislation, some money that could come our way to the community to subsidize and lower that cost, to provide these units that are so desperately needed in the entire state, if not right here. So I think there's lots of alternatives, lots of paths. It's certainly not a place that we should be putting roadblocks up or throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. The other thing I think that's very important, as much as the suggestion is that we would be doing the same things that's already being done out in the private sector, no one really is doing this yet. And some of the slides that were shown in previous presentations, and were also in the one Monday night, showed what is expected right now from elderly residential care is not anywhere near this vision of a place where you can be integrated with the larger community and look out and still feel young and healthy as you age. We could be a model for the rest of the nation. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Dancy. Anybody else? George? And we will spell your name right in the next minutes, just so you know.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
In the minutes of the last meeting, we spelled your name wrong. We will spell it correctly.
That's happened my entire life. All 80 years, it's been misspelled. It's a little surprising how much I agree with Dancy, because we had talked about it beforehand, and I wasn't quite sure. In order to arrive at a position where you shouldn't go ahead on this, you really have to discount the tremendous positive impact that Beach Cities Health District has had on the South Bay in terms of reducing obesity, their support for banning cigarette smoking, their just general healthy attitude towards all things having to do with our lives. So to me, this is just another way to fund that. You can't go after taxes anymore. That's just out. To go out for a parcel tax or something like that for this area, that's just not going to happen. So you have to find creative ways. I think Beach Cities currently and looking to the future is finding a way through this 3P, public-private partnerships and so forth, to fund programs that otherwise wouldn't be funded. And I think it's important to keep them. One other thing I noticed here is a completely accurate description of what elderly housing is today. It's boring. It's parking lots with a building in the middle of it. It's narrow halls. It's no place to walk with your parent or sibling other than through a parking lot. This would set an example for the private sector to get up to speed with what's necessary for our elder citizens and be a model. So to that degree, it actually builds on something that I think Mr. Pinsler referred to earlier as research and development. In my mind, it could be a great catalyst for other private development by seeing what could be done if you really have the kind of vision that you guys have exemplified over the years. So I support it and would get out there knocking on doors for it. So thanks.
Thank you, George. Anybody else want to speak? Going once? Okay, going twice? Okay. Board, now it's our turn. Next slide, which I assume says board discussion. There we go. Would anybody like to, where'd Noel go? Oh, there you are. Would anybody like to go first? Fish, go ahead.
So about a year and a half ago, I remember sitting at the chair, I think where Leslie is, and we were looking at all sorts of ideas, and I kept asking the question, well, that's a great idea, I love that input from the community, but how much is it going to cost?
Yeah.
And we had some very creative ideas, but there was never any numbers associated with it. We had no idea what this would end up being. So I'm really excited to see today the amount of work that's been done, particularly Tom, Monica, the finance team, consultants that have been part of this project. Having run commercial business before and being deep in financials, I can empathize with how much work it has been to get to this point. To have an analysis of what if we do nothing, that's a massive undertaking in and of itself. To be able to, put up a slide and have real numbers and real analysis to say, you know what, if we do nothing, we're not gonna survive. We're gonna start, over time, start eating into our cash balance. Having the analysis to understand what are our assumptions, what does 1 unit mean, what does 5 units mean, what does 100 units mean, what does 400 units mean, what does that mean in terms of revenue. It's fantastic to have that level of detail, level of financial planning. So I'm really excited to see that we've actually sort of wrapped our arms around a long-term plan. What if we do nothing? What if we do something? What does that something look like? How much does that cost? And to see all that put up on the slides today is a remarkable achievement to get to this point. I see ourselves, as a public health agency, and I think one of the things that, our central mission is preventative health, preventative wellness in the community. And we look at our land assets as a way to fund those projects. I don't necessarily see us in the housing business. I don't see us in other businesses. Our business is not to solve the housing crisis in the state of California. Our business is to improve health in this community. And so I feel this project is just that. It's a way for us to continue doing our work. It's a way to fund the work that we do that's good work, that's helpful to the community. It's a way to continue having a healthy beach community. And I think out of all the options that have been considered, I can't think of a better way to ensure a long, sustainable, and healthy financial future in conjunction with a healthy future of our community. I will say that I have a couple of concerns or questions or thoughts, and one of them is obviously what are the options to reduce the scope, because it is a massive amount of financing that we're looking at here. So what are the options to reduce scope? I'd be interested in seeing what those are. And if there aren't any, if this is what it takes, then obviously it is what it is. And I'd also like to know from a debt to equity ratio. So as we look at the Sunrise project, it was about a 10-year payback. So I want to understand what is the timeline of the payback of this particular project as we build it. So that's sort of the two missing pieces for me.
The chart, the money chart that Tom loves so much.
With the sunrise color.
Kind of, yeah, with 3 different lines. Can we go back to that for a second? This one.
Right, so this is our cash balance, but it doesn't take into account the debt load that we'd have throughout that whole, there's still a debt load.
Yeah, there is still a debt.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
paying off the debt.
Yeah.
Right. We showed the debt to equity ratio on the Sunrise, and that was something.
Okay, so
we think it's going to be.
Okay, so what you're asking for is not on this chart.
We think it's going to be similar, but we can certainly do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for how long? Because we take this. With every project there's risk, right? So as we take this risk on, as we go down this path, how long are we burdening the district with a certain amount of debt? Just to understand that, for fiscal prudence. That's the reason.
Got it. Yes.
But otherwise, I appreciate the public input. I appreciate everybody speaking up. First of all, for coming tonight, for sharing your views and concerns, for all the hard work that's gone into everybody that's been involved with the working group. It's been a long process, and I think we've got to a really exciting place. So thank you, everybody, for that.
I would just like to echo what you just said. I think that it was extremely comprehensive, and I don't know. A very good show. Impressed. And again, I want to thank staff for putting in all the work, gathering all the data, making some reasonable projections with the information that we know in absence of the EIR and everything like that. I concur that basically, I've been on the board now for a dozen years, and I see the 514 campus having multiple functions, but one of its functions is to help underwrite our ability to provide services. And, we have to come up with a redevelopment plan for the campus that will allow us to not just maintain our services, but to grow them in the future, because we anticipate that over the course of time, the demands for preventative care and wellness and the services we provide are going to increase. In addition to which, I think it's very important that we become a model and as a center of excellence for wellness and preventative care. And we are in a unique position here to do that. So, I think the vision is entirely consistent with our mission and the values of the district. And, I just want to thank everyone who participated in putting it together. It's been a long road.
Jane?
Yeah. Thanks to everybody once again for all their dedication to us and helping us with this problem. I guess it's not just our problem, it's the whole community's, so it's really helpful to have everybody there. And I thank for the staff for the thorough information that we've been given, and I know it's been a long, we've had lots of questions and a long haul to get where we are, but it's extremely helpful at this point in time to make it clear. The information to me was clear, at least, what directions we need to go in. Some of the concerns is that people have, the issue of the fact that we're doing, would be doing assisted living, and it would be used to make money. One of the things that caught my attention on our expanded services would be an adult daycare center. Mm-hmm. The community, all of those individuals who would have difficulty affording to go to an assisted living, the joy it would bring to family members who are taking care of loved ones at home, to bring a member over to this campus with all of the exciting things that would be going on, would be, I believe, an incredible service to this community. Could we do it without the money? No, we can't. It's a major undertaking. But there's a way that we would be in the forefront once again and servicing many more people in the community than we would be even with our skilled nursing facilities. So I love that option of making more money to be able to do things like that.
Michelle?
Thank you very much. And again, thanks to all of the staff and all of the hours and to the community partners. A couple of things that I think are important that I'd like to see, and I think the debt to equity is going to be important, but I'd also like to understand the population a little bit more. Some of us may not be here when this is completed, so we have to think about it. That's a terrible way to think of things, but that's the fact. So proportionally, who are going to be the people that are going to be in the beach cities that are going to be here to participate in this building X amount of years out? I think that's important. And proportionally, who are those individuals and what are their incomes? As we age, unless we had incredible parents that left us silver spoons, many people, their income is fixed and they don't have a lot of money. So I am going to be on the side of, I am not a supporter of all profit, certainly not, and that we have to be proportional, and if we do this, we have to reach the community that is our community. The other piece to this is, just to, I think Carrie Ann did an excellent job of showing that picture, but I work at a place that on Friday night or Saturday night, it's in an area where there's a lot of people that are 94, 99, I admit them to hospital, and they come from very exclusive areas in this particular town. And so it's usually the assisted living is something like 400 square feet. You wear a little thing around your neck. You can push on the button if something happens. And that to me is not living. And it's really trying to build something that is innovative. And what kind of an innovation center can we do? And to be a model is very important. Because what we're doing now is, in a sense, minimal. Warehousing, that's a good way of saying it, right. And I think that that's what we really need to think about. We don't know what our future looks like. And my other point is that it's not just about the quantity of your life, it's the quality. And so how can you get that quality? What does that mean? And as a community, I would really like to understand our population of our patients that are going to be 65 years and older and what their incomes are, and I think that's really crucial. But I'm all for this innovation because technology is going to drive a lot of things in a very different direction than what we're used to. You're not going to be driving up to your doctor's office, going to an office. You're going to have a lot of things that are going to be technologically able to be transmitted, and it's going to be a different day when this is finished. So thank you again for everybody.
The only thing I would add is it's not just income, it's assets too.
Oh, believe me, yeah. Thank you for that.
Okay. So I'd also like to thank staff and all of the community who are here today, who've been part of this process for over a year now, where we've been talking about this. And I'm just so glad to see all of you here and to continue the conversation. I want to summarize a couple of things I'm hearing from the board. I think everything up here, you have some consensus about moving forward in this direction. We're going to add in there some analysis of the debt to equity ratio and what's the timeline for paying that back over. And then we do want to see some options of what it would mean to reduce the scope. What are your thoughts on that? And then my question on that is, how would that impact starting an EIR? If we're changing the project or reducing the scope of the project, how does that impact starting the EIR? I think we do need to start the EIR, but I have that question. The other thing that I heard that Michelle is asking for is kind of revisiting the market analysis in a way and looking at the need, and then who are the people that are the market that we're talking about here, and what can we know about their resources, their income, their assets. The other thing that I'm hearing very strongly from all of us is a continued commitment to using our resources as a health district, our income, our assets, to maximize the health and wellness of this community. I think we all have that as a very strong foundation of why we need to do something like this, that it's about using our resources for maximizing public good. And that is not a new thing. That is how we've always functioned here. We've always been looking at, do we buy the land? Do we lease the land? Do we sell the land? How can we maximize income from our assets? And we have land that we purchase on Artesia that we rent out to the free clinic. It's not the free clinic anymore, it's South Bay Family Health Center. And that's a source of income. That's a place that is also providing services. We have Leap and Bound. We have Sunrise. We have lots of partnerships and programs that we've implemented in order to increase our bottom line revenues so that we can continue to do all of the amazing programs that we have in this community. And we have a commitment to that on this board. Although we do also want to be providing, if we can, affordable programs. How can we do that if it's possible? Sorry, I've had pneumonia over the past month since I was here last. So I seem to be losing my voice a little bit here. I hope I can keep it up for the evening. The other thing that's not on this list but that was talked about is if we're looking at possible partnerships, explore partnerships and project scope, I think it's important to all of us that our partners align with our mission. I think that's a key thing that came out of the working group, and that's something that we all think is very important. The other thing that I would like to just tease out a little bit in here in terms of analyzing combination of funding options and exploring new revenue sources. It's been mentioned about state funding for affordable housing. If that could be used for construction, if that could be used for capital, and then how does that impact on future programming? What are the options? It's all new. We have a new governor who he has a priority to do this. So there might be some funding there that we could get in on the ground floor, and that would be part of that resource exploration. As well as I'd like to get a better sense of what you think is available in terms of philanthropy. It's what I do for a living, so I can look at things like that, but I don't see what you might be seeing in terms of philanthropy for a project like this. So I'd like to know more what staff is thinking about with that. Okay, so that is kind of everybody's nodding and happy with that. So we are at 6:35. I'd like to, unless anybody has any further questions, staff or board, call this meeting as an adjournment, take a 5-minute break, and then reconvene for our full board meeting in 5 minutes.
Sounds good.